Happy New Year! It is the first show of the new year. Isn't that exciting? Let me make sure that I am not echoing. I don't believe I'll be echoing on YouTube, but welcome everybody. Happy New Year. I don't know if you do New Year's resolutions or you do goals on New Year's. I'd be curious to know what people do. I normally write myself what is called a future me letter. I haven't actually done it. It's already the third. Sorry, I'm like obsessed with my hair right now. It's already the third, and I haven't actually written my future me letter. But every year, what I normally do is I write a letter, and the letter is to dearfutureme.org, and you can set the time for when you want the letter to be sent back to you. And it basically is just you talking about the things that you want to do in your future. So all about it. So if you've made New Year's resolutions or if you haven't made New Year's resolutions, I would suggest just going to dearfutureme.org and actually writing a letter to your future self, because it really starts you to think about what it is that you want to do with your life. So again, Happy New Year. This is a topic I've been pondering for a little while, because I listen to what the internet is saying. I read the comments what the internet is saying. I read articles about certain topics. And this topic is one that I thought, hey, let's tackle this. Let's debate the concept of the present mother versus the absent father. I have a bit of a confession. I am a little bit obsessed with paternity court. And I got obsessed with paternity court. Like many people, we got obsessed with things during COVID. And I watched these shows. I was actually watching paternity court before I started this show. And I watched these shows. And generally, this is how the story goes. Young lady sleeping with multiple men before they've had a period, clearly. So they're sleeping with several men. I've seen up to one girl who said she had like 6 men that she had to test for paternity. So within, say, a 28-day cycle, these women have slept with multiple men. They either bring one man on the show or multiple men to prove who the father is. And generally, at some point of the show, they will start crying and say, I didn't have my father in my life. And so I don't want to repeat what happened. And so I just need to know who my child's father is. Inevitably, that's how these shows go. Inevitably on paternity court, you have a young lady who has to test someone for the paternity of her child, crying and saying that she never had a father in her life, and therefore this is the reason that she acts the way she does, and she also doesn't want her child to be in a situation where they don't have their father in their life and end up in paternity court. So one of the things that I have been thinking about is, why is it that the accountability is put on someone who had no presence in your life in terms of how you grow up? So for me, it's about correlation, right? So someone is a ghost in your life, they do not exist, which means that they actually have no influence on your life. You don't know how they sound, you don't know how they walk, you don't know how they talk, you don't know their values, you don't know their character. They actually do not exist, right? They are a ghost. And then on the other side, you have a very present parent, which would be the mother. So your mother is very present. Your mother influences you. You know how she walks, she talks, she acts, her reactions, her character, her values. Because as the parent that is there, she's the one instilling those things in you. And so if you don't have generally good character, would think you turn to the person who was there to groom you. Who are the people that she's surrounding you with? Who are your grandparents? Who are her friends? Who are your aunties? Who are your uncles? Who has she brought in and out of your life because she wants you to have a father? Whatever the case might be, I have been looking at this and I'm like, as someone who did raise a child primarily in my home, right? I raised my daughter. My daughter still lives with me. She's 22. Her father has a very present, is very present in her life, as I should say. Her father is very present in her life, but her upbringing, I would go 85% of it. He would probably say a little bit more. 85% of it was me. I influenced a lot of the things that she did. A lot of the decisions that my daughter made were based on me. My daughter took the same major that I did in university. She went to the same university that I did. My daughter ended up in the same primary school and middle school that I went to, not the same high school. She went to a different high school. Like, she's made a lot of decisions based on my influence. So my thing has always been, why is it that the present mother doesn't hold as much accountability when a child makes bad decision, but the present mother gets all of the rave when they make good decisions? I'm going to let that sink in again. And ask the question again. Why does the present mother not hold the same level of accountability when a child does something wrong in their life when their father was absent, but that same present mother gets all of the glory and all of the rave when the child does something right? So I get a lot of praise on how I have guided my daughter into adulthood, right? I get a lot of praise about, she graduated on the dean's list. My daughter and her former dance team came third place in Canada's Got Talent. My daughter has accolades in dance up the wazoo, right? She's doing amazing things, and she's been doing amazing things from, honestly, I swear, the day she came out of my kitty cat, right? Like, she has just been a amazing child. And I am so blessed because of it. And so I get all of this rave of, oh my God, you did such a great job raising her. But what if I didn't? What if I didn't do a good job raising her? What if she was one of the young ladies who's now having her full front on Beyonce's internet doing OnlyFans? Now, would I get just as much blame for her not growing up the way that most people think she should have? Or would people have said, you did the best you can, despite the fact that you had to raise her alone? Even though her father is very active in her life. I want us to think about some of these things, and I want to think of it from a logical standpoint. I'm going to tell you, if my daughter ended up being a slur on Beyonce and Blue Ivy's Good Internet and had her whole pum pum out the door on OnlyFans, I would take responsibility for that. Because somewhere down the line, I failed as a mother. I failed as a parent. I did not instill the values and the morals and the character that I wanted her to go into the world to. I could not turn around and blame her father because we were not together raising her in the same home for how she turned out, when the majority of the influence that she had came from me. So we've got someone here on Instagram. They would say y'all failed as parents, even though she's a grown woman. The funny thing about Is It Naturally Fair is, would they say y'all? Would they say you did the best you can, Sheba, despite the fact that Trevor is my daughter's father's name, despite the fact that Trevor, you and him were not together? Would it be y'all, or would it be, you know what, Sheba, you did what you could, man, if only he was more active in her life? despite the fact he's been active in her life. Oh, interesting. More blame on you than him. I find that's an interesting perspective because I often find that a lot of the blame when a child, especially a female child, doesn't turn out the best or in a way that you think that she should, that people blame the absent father and not the present mother. And I'm with you, naturally, Fierce. I would be the one to blame. It wouldn't be the absence of the father. And in my situation, I can't even say, like, he wasn't an absent father. My daughter's father is very active in her life to this day. We were just not together. But for those who actually have a absent father, or a father who comes maybe in and out, you see them every 5 years or something, right? Yes, I think that can have an impact, but and I don't want to use the word blame, but to make a correlation between the young girl, especially, not turning out the way she should, and the fact that her father wasn't around, versus the fact that her mother was around and she still turned out that way. Sorry, I had to realize I cover up my boobies because my hands are moving all over the place. So, it's funny because when I did the poll yesterday and I posted it, I want to say, I to remember the numbers, I believe it was 67% said the present mother is to blame, but there were still 33% of people that thought, you know what, a father's absence in a child's life is going to have a more influential impact than a present mother. And this is where I'm going to give you a scenario. I'm going to get really personal. So, for those of you who don't know, I am the product of an affair. So my father was married and my mother was his mistress for all intensive purposes. She did not know he was married. That's the story I was told. She did not know he was married at the time that she got pregnant with me. As Jamaicans would say, my daddy was a gallus. So my mother has me. My parents are in very different financial situations. My father is settled down. He has got a wife. He's got 2 children, my older sisters, and he lives in a very lovely house in Jamaica. It was actually quite lovely when I was growing up. We a 2-car garage. If I remember, we had 4 bedrooms, a huge backyard with mango trees and all the things that we could imagine having. He did well. My mother didn't do so well. So at some point, I came to live with my father and my stepmother, who raised me as one of her children. And so I grew up thinking that my stepmother was actually my mother. And then I eventually emigrated to Canada when I was 9 to live with my biological mother. I tell you this story to say neither of those women, neither of the women that raised me, if I can recall in my 44-year-old brain, ever said a bad word about my father. Despite his actions as a flawed man, when it came to him being my father, there was not a bad word said about him. Actually, my mother used to rave about my father because despite the fact that he had this character flaw of being a cheater, when it come to being a parent, especially my parent, he was a great father. And I grew up consistently hearing about how amazing my father was. It was to the point that there were things that my father, the man, did that people chose to keep from me until I was damn near 40, because they saw how I revered my father. My father walked on water, right? Like, I love my daddy. My daddy walked on water until he didn't, and that was the day he died. You can tell me nothing about my father. And so learning things about him, I didn't, no one, and then actually the person who told me as a mistake. Then they had to go tell my eldest sister that they accidentally told me. Then my eldest sister had to have a conversation with me. And then the whole family was like, oh my God, we've been like holding this for you for 40 years. And now you know. So what are we going to do with it? Because we never wanted you to see your father in a different light than you had seen him, which was as your superhero. So I had all of these women in my life conspire for me to see my father in the best possible way. And so in turn, my view of men is very positive, because I was, whether it, some people could say I was led to believe that my father was this fantastic man. He was a fantastic, listen, I would say my father was a flawed man, but he was an amazing father. And I had several women in my life conspire to ensure I only saw my father in a positive light. And then the men that came in my life, like the men that my mother had in my life, my mother has had two men since I was 9 years old. There are only two men I have seen in my mother's life. Two men from 9 to now 44. Two men I have seen in my mother's life. And that I got to Jamaica. Yeah, I came here when I was 9. So what's that? 35 years. 35 years I've seen two men. And both of those men I hold in very high esteem, especially the first one, because he was part of my life from, I would say, 10 until, oh God, I had my daughter, until my daughter was maybe 7 or 8, or they might have broke up by the time my daughter was double digits. So let's say my daughter was, let's call it 10. I want to say, so we're talking about 20 plus years of the same person who had a great influence in my life and then turned around and had a great influence in my daughter's life because he was grandpa. And I was always surrounded by positive, amazing men. And therefore, I view men very positively. Let me just see what they truly loved you and wanted your views not to be skewed by mistakes. Thank you, Naturally Fierce. You made me go into my point. This is why I'm not saying, because here's the thing, a present mother and an absent father can be equally influential on a child's upbringing and their rearing and their viewpoints. Feeling empty, I can only imagine, as someone who had a very active father, as someone who made sure that I had a very active father for my daughter, despite me and her father didn't always agree. But the one thing I always said is, we better grow up before she does, because it is important for her to have the best view of men, especially her father, because her father is her first love. And honestly, my daughter looks exactly like her father, to the point where people used to see me in the mall when she was a kid and be like, is that Trevor's baby? I'm like, sure is, because she looked exactly like him, right? And so I always made sure that her view of men was very positive. So it takes me to the point that Naturally Fierce just said. This is why, for me, I would answer that a present mother is more influential in a child's life than an absent father. This is why. Because it is the present mother that creates the narrative for this child about men. There are many things. And when I say, and I just said, in the 44 years that I have been alive, my mothers, I have two mothers, one who gave birth to me and one that raised me. My father was married to the one that raised me and had an affair with the one that gave birth to me. Neither of these women have said a bad word. Even when I found out not the greatest things about my father, they still protected him. They still protect. They were like, he loved you. He was your father. He was flawed. I completely get that. And to this day, when my father passed away in September of 2022, my two mothers shared a room at his funeral. They shared my ex-fiance was astounded at how, okay, this was even possible, that 40-something years later, these women still got along and were able to do this, because we came together out of love and respect for my father. And so, getting back to my point, the present mother creates the narrative for the absent father. She can either say, you know what? Your father may not be in your life, but I can tell you he loves you very much. And then she can also bring very positive role models into that child's life, whether it is through uncles, people at the church, coaches, whomever. Just surround that child with positive role models where she's always there. They're always seeing a very positive image of men. They're hearing positive things and they're seeing positive things. Just consistently. As opposed to your daddy was a no good piece of shit who left me. Men ain't shit, they ain't ever gonna be shit. When you grow up, you need to be strong and independent because ain't no man gonna get over on my daughter because I had men get over. Like, it's a very different narrative. It is a very different narrative, and we have to be open and honest with ourselves and think from a very logical standpoint. How can someone whose very presence is not known about, like, you don't know who this person absent father is, you don't know if he's a good guy, if he's a bad guy, you know nothing about him, he does not exist, he's a ghost, poof, be gone. Is that a great thing? I could not have imagined as a young lady not growing up with my father in my life. I have to be honest, I could not imagine it. But even when my father wasn't present in the home, even when I moved from Jamaica and had to come to Canada to live with my biological mother again, to whom he was not married, there was never a negative thing said about him at all. And my mother had chosen a man that she knew would be a good role model to me and be there and have a presence. He was not going to be my father, but he was going to be a man that was going to be influential and be at the standard of my father, because that was important. And so these are all narratives that can happen when a mother is intentional about how she's going to raise her child. Ladies, we have to be intentional about how we're going to raise these little human beings who did not ask to be here. Our babies didn't ask to be born. They didn't ask for the life that we've given them. They didn't ask for it. We chose them. And we should be choosing to have children not just because we oops and got pregnant. Because you don't have to oops and get pregnant. Not in 85, not in 95, not in 2005, not in 2015, and damn well not in 2025. Nobody just oops and gets pregnant. We made a conscious decision to have a man who we are not either in a committed relationship or married to or whatever the case might be, basically pump and dump in us, and that created a baby. That's what we did. Like, let's just call a spade a spade. These are conscious decisions that we made. And so if we're also going to make the conscious decision that this child should be born into the world, I think we have to have a game plan about how we are going to raise that child. Because at some point, that child's need trumps yours. And the moment that child is born, that child's need is going to trump yours. When we choose to be mothers, we are choosing, whether we like it or not, to be the primary caregiver for that child, even if it's only for the first few years of life, because a child needs its mother. It breastfeeds, it clings to its mother, it does that. And so having a child is the most important duty that you have. And so the fact that so many of us are doing it willy-nilly is beyond me. You have to have a plan for how you're going to raise your life. You have to have a plan of how you're going to raise your child. And part of that plan, if the other parent isn't around, is how am I going to ensure that I am still raising a responsible, respectable, intelligent child of good character, good moral character? How am I going to do that? What are the things that I have to say? What are the things I'm going to do? What is the influence I'm going to have? Who are the people I'm going to surround my child with? Who are the people I'm not going to surround my child with? Who at this point do I need to have out of my life because I'm about to be a mom and therefore this is what I need to do? I'm not going to sit here and preach and talk about you need to be married before you have babies. I wasn't married before I had a baby. I'm telling my daughter that because I have influence over her. I can tell my daughter what she's a child. I can't tell the rest of you what you need to do, but at least if you're going to make a decision to have a baby, you have to have a game plan about how you're going to raise that child. And I do not encourage mothers to then turn around and blame the father who chose not to be there for all of the shortcomings of your life, and therefore instill that into the child so that they're going out into the world blaming a ghost for all of their downfall and praising you for everything that they do well in life, because you were the only person in the home. And therefore, I take a lot of the responsibility, good, better, and different, for how my daughter turned out. She lived with me. For again, 85% of her life was waking up with her mother. At the parent-teacher meetings, I was there. At the basketball games, I was there. Pick her up from daycare, I was there. At the dances, I was there. At all the things, I was there. Therefore, how could it be her father if I was there? And listen, I'm not spending long on this, but it is something that I wanted us to really think about. Because I think it sounds, in today's world where a lot of us act on emotions without much thought, it is a better narrative to say, the fact that this man didn't want to be around me and didn't want to be with me means he didn't want to be around his child, and he's a piece of crap, and all men are like this. I was watching one show called Ready to Love. It was the season they were in Miami, and this woman had 3 kids by 2 different men, and she was on the show looking for love. She supposedly found love, and it ended up that the guy had no kids, and when they got to the reunion, he was like, honestly, like, listening to her, it didn't make sense why neither of the fathers wanted to be in the child's life. Like, some point, like, it's her. And she basically turned around and said, I don't know what you're talking about. Black men leave their children all the time. This is what Black men do. They leave their children all the time. And this was a Black woman who gave her womb to 2 different men. The second man she had the baby with, which is the youngest child. So she had 2 with the first and 1 with the last one. She said that she gifted this man a child. But she really sat there on national television after having 3 kids with 2 different men and saying that Black men leave their children all the time. This is what they do. And so it is not her fault that she decided to give babies to men that she wasn't married to, because this is just what Black men do. I was appalled. I was disgusted. I was annoyed. No accountability on her side about the fact that she had made a decision that had actually impacted her life. Because the reality is, I personally do not know a bunch of Black men who leave their children. The funny thing is, I can, off my hand right now, 5 men in my life come to mind who don't even have children. And these men range in age from 41 to 47. No children. Black men with good careers, handsome, intelligent, ambitious, driven, all the things that women say that they want, and they have no children. And they consciously didn't have any children because they hadn't met the woman with whom they wanted to have a child with. And they had been very careful to ensure that they were doing the best thing for them in their life. So when I hear this narrative of Black men are leaving their children and Black men are this and Black men are that, I know a ton of great Black men who do not have children. But I've also heard of men who have several children with several different women. If you were here last week or the week before, I told you about the guy that I met who had 7 kids by 7 different women. And I was like, no, thank you. Because you breathe on me. It seems like people get pregnant. And so that was a choice I made. I'm not going to go and lay down beside somebody who's made that choice 7 times. The first time you get somebody pregnant from unprotected sex, and then you go back and you go back and you go back and you keep making the same decision 7 times. But and again, a woman knows you have one child with one woman, and she goes and she's baby mama number 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. I can understand again the first and second moms, right? First time he might have been young, whatever. Second time you think that you guys are going to be in something, maybe it doesn't work, you have a child. But baby mama number 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and on. This is a ridiculous choice. I would never. A man tells me he has that many children, unless he is putting a ring on my finger and committing to me for life, what do I look like signing up to be a baby mama again? He'd already had baby mamas. You want to sign up to be a baby mama? And this is why I'm saying, like, let's not act as if we as women are not accountable for the choices that we make. And a lot of us, when I watch these shows, again, Fraternity Court, you watch Kendra G, you watch Kevin Samuels. God, we used to watch Maury back in the day, even Jerry Springer. You would hear these stories of these women who went into situations knowing they were not scammed. These men didn't lie to them. These men were very forthcoming. They told them how many children they had with how many different women. And if they had bothered to ask, they would have dug a little bit deeper, and these men would have likely been honest with them about why he's not with any of the baby mamas. Yet they signed up to go lay down and have unprotected sex with a man who had already admitted to making families that he's not sticking with. And so at this point, I have nothing for you. But then what happens is that woman is now left with that child. She has the anger from that situation, and then she takes that anger, and that anger fuels her, and that is what she's using to raise that child. So yes, the absentee father has left an impact on the mother, and it is the mother who instills values and influences the child based on the hurt from the absentee father. Is it, because in my opinion, it isn't the absentee father that's the issue. It's the fact that the father is absent and the present mother uses that to influence the child. Because to me, I hear too many stories on these shows for me to think that these women were growing up in homes Give me 1 second, guys. I'm gonna have to get my daughter's laptop that is in the living room and go hand it to her. Sorry, everyone. It is called live taping. So I have to go grab my daughter's MacBook because someone is calling her. Anywho, back to what I was saying. And so the absent father does have an influence, but to me, in my personal opinion, and I really want you guys to think about it, it's the impact that the absent father has on the present mother that she then turns around and instills into the child. It isn't the mere absence. It is the fact that the absent father has created an issue in the present mother's life, and she, with her tongue, has used her words to influence the child. So the mere absence of the father isn't the issue, in my humble opinion. Because if you do not know of someone's existence, if they have no impact and influence on your life, how can they be blamed for the issues you have in your life and the present mother who does influence you? she only gets the accolades. I'm confused. Anywho, I wanted to read before we sign off because I actually have another show. My phone is like going off like crazy. I have several different phones. I don't turn this one on often. And so, of course, everything is coming up on this bloody phone, but I digress. Um, there are articles that are talking about, again, the impact of the absent father and the impact of the present mother. And I really do want people to read some of these articles and make up their own mind about their thoughts on this. I don't want to influence people's thoughts on this. I'm just here. I sit here every Tuesday, everybody, and just give you my opinion. Whether you like it or not, I'm going to give it to you. It is what it is. And so my opinion on this whole thing is that the more influential person in a child's life is the present mother. I actually hate this phone right now. Like if you see, it is just going off in my hand. I want to actually put it on do not disturb or something because Jesus, Father, it is annoying going off in my hand. But I want you to come to your own conclusion. I am not here to convince you of any narrative. I'm here for you to think about the question of absent father versus present mother. Who is more influential? Now, there's an article that was just written that says here, and this is from betterhelp.com. And BetterHelp, if I'm not mistaken, is an online therapy. You can get therapy online as opposed to having to go into an office, which I believe is going to make it cheaper. So they say here, growing up with an absent father can lead to a range of emotional impacts, but how it affects one person won't necessarily apply to another. While certain traumatic experiences can have a lasting effect, it's also possible to overcome and move past your loss. And this is where that word is interesting for me. How can you lose something you never had? If you've never had the influence of the man who is your father, how can a loss be felt? This is where, for me, like, I would love for people who have been in this situation to reach out to me and kind of give me their stories because I actually do not understand it. I don't understand how you can feel a loss of something you've never had. Like, if I've never been in love and I've never been in a relationship, and I've never felt like what it is to break up with someone or lose someone, how can I feel the loss of something I've never had? I can think about what it may have been like had I ever fallen in love or had I ever broken up with someone. But there's no real loss. I haven't felt it. There's been no real impact. I don't know. This one, I won't lie, is difficult for me. This is a difficult one for me because, again, I grew up with a father. I made sure that my daughter's father, even when it was hard, and sometimes it was hard for us, it was not always easy. I do not sit here and pretend it was easy. For the first little bit of her life, honestly, especially after we broke up, we had some rough years. With some very rough years. But we got it together before it really could have an impact on her because she was the most important thing we had ever done together. And so we were going to make sure that she grew up surrounded by a mother and father who was going to give her as much love as she could handle. And sometimes the love is too much. Let me tell you, she's overwhelmed. She's like, nah. But that was a promise we made to her because she didn't ask to be here. And so I would love for people who have grown up without a father to give me some insight. All of my friends that I have grown up with fathers, every single one. Yep. As I had to go through like all of my close friends that I would sit down with, um, three of their parents were married. Four. Four of their parents were married. One, her stepfather was in her life until his passing because of COVID, and she's in her 40s now. And her stepfather, I want to say, has been in her life since she was very young, maybe 3 or 4. And so she grew up in that structure. I had a very present father until he passed away, or actually got COVID and got dementia. But that was at the latter part of my life. That didn't happen until I was like 41. So I had a very present father. I don't know many females in my life that don't have active fathers. And so I am not in a space to speak on what that is like to not have a father in your life. I have no clue what that's like. And maybe I'm getting this all wrong. Maybe it does burn such a hole. And even if your mother says all of the right things, and even if your mother says, oh my God, your father would have, your father couldn't be here because of whatever, or your father was a great man, and like, with all of the great things, it would still have an impact. I'd love to hear. I am all about diversity of thoughts and opinion. And as I really sat and thought about it and go, wow, like, I don't really know a lot of people that I can go and survey and say, what was it like growing up without a father? Because most of the people that I grew up with had fathers. My actually upbringing was the most dysfunctional of all of my friends, because again, I was born out of an affair. So I am the most quote unquote dysfunctional, and I have nothing but great things to say about my father, because he was very active and very present, even when we were not in the same home. And for the first part of my life, he raised me from like 0 to 9. I was with my dad. Those are the influential years. I was with my dad. I was not with my mom. I was with my dad. My dad was very influential in my life, again, even when he wasn't there. And so I would ask anyone watching this episode who did not grow up with a father, can you please email me, or make a comment under this video on YouTube or Instagram. But if you want to email me at fyftheshow@gmail.com and let me know what impact not growing up with a father had on your life, and whether or not your mother or your guardian, it may not have been your mother, had positive or negative things to say about the absence of your father. Did you ever have a chance to sit down with your father and speak to him and hear his side of why he wasn't around? I'd be curious. I definitely want to learn from this, because maybe my opinion will change. Maybe I will say, what, the absent father is the reason. My logic, that doesn't logic for me, and I think that's where it is not a feeling thing, right? Like, it doesn't logic for me as someone who was the very present mother, thinking that a father that's not around could logically have more influence than me, who is around, and she sees every day, and she copies how I talk, how I move. Like, my daughter used to copy a lot of the things that I do because I was her role model. I was influential. She was doing all these things that mommy was doing. How's she going to do and have an impact on a man that potentially wasn't there? Now, again, my daughter's father was there. For anybody that knows me, don't be thinking that's what I'm saying. He was very present, is still very present, but he still was not the person she lived with. I was. And so when she would go to his house, of course, she's exhibiting characters of me, good, bad, or indifferent. My daughter's father says all the time, listen, my child looks like me, but she acts like you. Why? Because I was the one she grew up with. I was the one who influenced her life. I was the one who influenced her decision. I was the one that she came to when she was at a crossroads in her life about what direction she was going to go to. It was my advice that she would generally listen to. Not saying that she would listen to her dad, but if her dad, honestly, if I said one thing and her dad said another, she'd probably go and lean towards what I said, because I was there. I had seen her through all of the things that she had been through. I was there for it. And so, of course, my presence in her life would be more influential. So, but again, That is my logic. That's how my brain is wired. But if someone can tell me a story and stories that will make me feel differently, I am happy to hear it, because again, the whole point of this show is to change the conversation around Black relationships, and that is what I intend to do. So I appreciate everyone for watching this. I really do want to hear from people about this topic. I definitely want to have some feedback about this topic. So again, if it is if there's something I'm missing, I want to know. If I'm just completely just missing something from this idea, please let me know, because again, that is why I created this show, because I want to change the conversation around Black relationship by having engaging discussion and being able to listen to understand, not to respond. So I appreciate everybody. I am going to run because I have another show that I also do. If you do not follow my other show, please follow Not Your Typical Girl Talk, spelled just how it is. So Not Your Typical Girl Talk, on Instagram and on YouTube. That is my other show that's more about entertainment and fun and all the good stuff. We try to make sense of the foolishness on the internet. That's what we say. So follow my other show, Not Your Typical Girl Talk, on Instagram and on YouTube. And feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions, comments, if you would like to come on the show, if you would like to be a guest host, if you have any topics that you would like me to cover. I'm looking to bring on and expand season 5. Hey, Happy New Year! We got to chat because it's the New Year, sir. We got to line up our schedule. So happy New Year to you. Happy New Year again to everyone. I started off the top of the show saying this, but if you are someone who likes resolutions, or wants to manifest a life, or whatever it is that you want to do, there is a website called futureme.org, spelled future me and then .org, where you can write a letter to your future self. I do it every year. I'm actually a little bit late this year because I normally do it on the 31st for the 1st, but your girl's been working. So I need to write that letter to my future self, and you basically talk about the things that you want to accomplish in life, and you basically send it to your future self to see if you did any of that stuff. And I always say, when you write things down, it is much better than keeping it in your head, because when you have to write it out, you're getting the thoughts out of your head, you start to visualize what it is, and then you start making a plan about how to execute that. So futureme.org if you want to write a New Year's resolution letter. And again, if you've heard something on the show and you disagree with what I'm saying or want to give a different perspective, please email me. Again, this is a sensitive topic, and as someone who grew up with a very present father in my life and is surrounded by people who have very present fathers in their life, I do not understand what it's like to not have a father in my life. And so I would love to hear the stories from people who did not have present fathers, the impact of that absentee father in their life. And maybe on another show, if I do get a bunch of them, I will read the stories and we can talk about that. But I appreciate everybody. Again, if you do not follow my other show, please do Not Your Typical Girl Talk on Instagram, on YouTube. I'm going to sign off and eat dinner and go do that show in 32 minutes. Okay, have a good night, everybody. Bye. Bye.